I'm Elizabeth at A Literary Princess, and it's been kind of a while. So today I am doing my August wrap-up, but I also wanted to start with a little bit of a quick life update to explain why I was gone for 2 weeks. And if you're like, Elizabeth, I don't care about your life, you feel free to skip this. I've got the chapters up. But I did want to let you know what was going on because I don't know if I'm gonna vanish again for a little while at some point. So it'll be 2.5 weeks ago when this goes up. My brother passed away. And yeah, that has been hard. So I was very busy with that and being with my family, and obviously couldn't be filming. And I also just wasn't in the mood to film. And so now it's been a bit, and I feel more in the mood to film, mainly because I want a distraction. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like this is gonna be very, like, I don't know if I'm gonna always feel like filming every week like I usually do. So if I vanish again for a little while, please know this is probably why, and that I'm just trying to deal with what has happened. So let's get into the wrap up. I read 15 books this month. Like, you saw that insane TBR at the beginning of August. I did not read all of them, but I read 15 of them. That's pretty friggin' good. So I'm very pleased with myself. So we've got a lot to do, so let's jump right in. So first up is actually one that I had started for Jane Austen July, but that I didn't get to finish. And this is Belinda by Maria Edgeworth. Edgeworth is a contemporary of Jane Austen's. She was writing this in 1801, or she published it in 1801. And this deals with Belinda, who is a young woman who has been sent to stay with Lady Delacour in London so that she can be out in the season and potentially find someone to marry. And it deals with gender issues. It actually deals with racial issues. There is a interracial marriage that occurs in this book. And I was like, wow, 1801? Really? So there's a lot of really interesting stuff. And it just follows this heroine, Belinda, who is kind of a prototype to Jane Austen's heroines. So earlier heroines of like Frances Burney were always very, very like perfect and good and sentimental. And Belinda is very good and quite perfect, but she's very practical and not like being led by her emotions at all. And actually, I mean, I think even people in the book called her a bit cold, but I found her really likable and so practical. And I was like, yeah, girl, you are right. I adored this. I gave this 5 stars. Ugh, it's so good. If you love Jane Austen, go read Maria Edgeworth because she's amazing. All right, then next up was one for my feminist theory exam list. This is Blood, Bread, and Poetry by Adrienne Rich. This is a collection of essays from the years 1979 to 1985. So I had read 2 or 3 of these before for my feminist theory class, but I wanted to read the whole book for my exam, and I thought this was great. I gave it 4 stars. I liked some essays more than I liked others, but overall, I actually really like Adrienne Rich. Next up was for my popular women's fiction, Victorian fiction list, and this was the nonfiction section, and it doesn't have a real cover. It's just a black book. But this is New Women Fiction, Women Writing First Wave Feminism by Anne Heilman. This was really great as well. I also gave it 4 stars, and it was just looking at the different new women writers and the impact that they made. What were they talking about? Their discontent with marriage, their issues of gender and sexuality, and then the woman, like, so the chapter is called A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Woman, so dealing with women artists, women writers, And I really like this. It gave me a lot of new books to go look for. As if I need any more new books to go look for. I don't need new books. I added more to my exam list because of this. We're not going to talk about it. But yeah, I thought this was great. I gave it 4 stars. All right, next up was actually a reread, and I think the only reread, one of 2 rereads. This is Hard Times by Charles Dickens. So I actually talked about this very recently in an underrated Victorian literature video. This deals with Thomas Gradgrind, who runs this school, and he has raised his children, and he is putting this philosophy of fact into work at this school. It is just raise children with facts only, no emotion, no imagination, just facts, and it backfires horribly. Shock. But this is great. I read this back in undergrad and I really enjoyed it. I loved it even more this time. I give this 4.5 stars. I think this is actually one of Dickens' like tightest books. Like everything just moves at a great pace. Look how short it is. The characters are great. Everything pulls together. None of the meandering that you might find in like Bleak House. I thought this was amazing. 4.5 stars. Next up is actually, I have 2. I have read some plays by Oscar Wilde. So I read Lady Windermere's Fan and The Importance of Being Earnest. I gave both of these 4 stars. They are social comedies, and they were really fun. It's always kind of weird reading plays. I really would love to see these performed because that's how they're meant to be seen. Like if you're just reading a play, it's a little bit weird, but to see it performed. So Lady Windermere's Fan deals with Lady Windermere, who has come to believe that her husband is having an affair, but things are not what they seem. It takes place over the course of 24 hours, and it's great. It was awesome. I loved it. And then The Importance of Being Earnest deals with these 2 men who are trying to court women, and they are both lying about their identity and saying that they are a man called Earnest who does not actually exist. And honestly, this was hysterical. This is like, if I had to pick one to see performed, I would really want to see The Importance of Being Earnest performed because it's hysterical and I think it would just be so much fun. So yeah, I gave each of these 4 stars. All right, next up is one that was online. This is a Victorian women's fiction, Marriage, Freedom, and the Individual by Shirley Foster. So this was looking at the issue of marriage in several works by women writers of the Victorian period and issues they had with marriage and how it conflicted with professional life. Why did being single seem potentially more attractive? And this was good. I gave this, I think 4 stars. Yes, I did. I gave it 4 stars. I think it'll be really helpful for my dissertation. And yeah, it also gave me some books to look at. Next up was for my, not my Victorian women's list. This was for my feminist theory list, and I actually had a physical copy, but I brought it to campus, so it's up here for you. This is The Proper Lady and the Woman Writer, Ideology as Style in the Works of Mary Wollstonecraft, Mary Shelley, and Jane Austen by Mary Poovey. I said this in the TBR video, I'll say it again, that's a lot of Marys. I gave this 3.5 stars. So I think it had some really interesting stuff to say about all 3 of the writers. I really enjoyed the parts about Jane Austen the most because she's more who I deal with. But I did find it kind of boring at times and like I was kind of skimming. So ultimately I give it 3.5 stars. Next up, I skipped 2 books. Whoops. So in between Lady Windermere's Fan and The Importance of Being Earnest, I read 2 other books. And one was The Clever Woman of the Family by Charlotte Mary Young. I gave this 4 stars. This is for my Victorian popular women's fiction list. This was great. So this deals really with this little, like this one neighborhood in a town. But the main female character is Rachel, who's considered the clever woman of the family. And she's obnoxious. She's so obnoxious. She thinks she knows best about everything, and she really doesn't. And ultimately, it's her learning that, like, being the clever woman is really not, or her idea of the clever woman, because, and at first it seems a little bit anti-feminist, because it's like Rachel needs to be basically led by a man. So her father has passed, so she's like kind of the one in charge of her family and leading them, and she's not doing a good job. And then she, of course, eventually gets married and falls in love with him, and then life starts to get better. She makes all kinds of mistakes before that, like some really major screw-ups that have devastating consequences. So at first it seems really anti-feminist, because it's like, wow, a woman needs a man. But there are other characters in here that show that no, a woman doesn't necessarily need a man. There is another character, Ermine Williams, who, it says at the end, she's the true clever woman. Like, she does a lot of what Rachel wants to do, but because she is better educated than Rachel and just not as conceited and pushy, she is actually able to achieve these things in addition to getting married to a man that she loves. And then we have Rachel's cousin, who seems like this, she's got like 7 children, and she's a widow, and she seems like really like sweet and mild, and like, but she ends up being the real hero of the story. So I love this. I gave it 4 stars. I have so much to say about it. I might do like a video on it. I might write a paper on it. I don't know. I thought it was great. All right, and then the other one that I read in there was The Madwoman in the Attic, The Woman Writer and 19th Century Literary Imagination by Sandra Gilbert and Susan Gubar. This is a classic work of feminist literary theory. It's chunky. I just want it to be known I read this in like 4 days. Yeah. Anyway, I thought this was good. I ultimately gave it 4 stars. So it is dealing with this idea of women kind of showing these like doubles in their works. Like there's the proper, actually this is what The Proper Lady and The Woman Writer was dealing with a lot too, like the proper lady, but then underneath there's that anger that they're showing through characters like Bertha Mason Rochester and Jane Eyre to kind of rage against the system, basically. So this looked at mostly British women, but it also did look at a few American women. I thought it was good. I don't agree with all of it. I think it relies way too heavily on Freudian theory, which I think I've talked about before. I hate Freudian theory. I think it's bullshit. And this does lean very heavily into it, which I think is a mistake, but ultimately it's great. I've found it very useful over the years. I'm glad I finally got to read the whole thing. It's large. All right, anyway, so then I read The Victorian Women's Marriage and The Proper Lady and The Woman Writer. And then after that, I read Kim by Rudyard Kipling. So this is a story of Kim, who is a Irish boy orphaned in India when his father, who's a soldier, dies, and he is raised in India. And he just kind of like goes and does whatever he wants. He ends up going on this pilgrimage with a llama, and then he runs into his father's old regiment, and they find out that it's who he is, and he gets sent off to school. And he ultimately ends up working in like basically like secret agent type stuff, like spies and for the British Army, because they are planning, I believe it's I think it's for Afghanistan against Russia. It's the Great Game. So this was really interesting. I liked the parts where Kim was younger for the most part, and the things that were less political, like just his hijinks that he gets up to, wandering around India, being able to pass as either a native or as British. So that was really fun to see. I ultimately gave it 3 stars because I did skim a lot of like the more political sections because I was just kind of like, I don't care, which is bad, but so yeah, very enjoyable, very short. Yeah. All right, next up was my one fun book of the month, and this was my favorite book of the month, and it's my favorite book of the year now. Like, remember back when I was like, I don't think anything could knock The World Cannot Give or The Woman in White off my top spot? They've been knocked off their top spot for the year. This is Babel, or The Necessity of Violence, An Arcane History of the Oxford Translators' Revolution by R.F. Kuang. Holy shit, guys. This is so good. I cannot even. So it's like, it's billed as Jonathan Strange meets and Mr. Norrell meets the secret history, but critiquing imperialism. And I was like, it's probably not gonna be, but it totally was. It had everything I loved about both of those books, and then it was critiquing imperialism. It was showing the issues of sexism and racism in academia. So it's set in the Victorian period, but it's super relevant to today because apparently not much has changed in academia. But so this follows Robin Swift, who is a boy from China who is brought over by Professor Lovell to England to be trained as a translator to go into the Royal Institute of Translation at Oxford University. And there they use translation to work magic with silver. So this is like an alternate England. Kind of like in Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. And it's amazing. That's all I'm gonna say. It's amazing. Go read it. Do yourself a favor and go read this book. It's so good. Next up was one for my exam lists. This was for Victorian popular women's fiction. This was Marcella by Mary Augusta Ward, also known as Mrs. Humphrey Ward, which was her married name. I gave this 3.5 stars, so this is chunky. It follows a girl named Marcella, who is a socialist. She's fallen in with this group of socialists in London, and she is from landowning class, but she kind of has that conflict with her socialist ideas, but also kind of liking being of the landowning class. And she goes to live at her ancestral home, and a lot of stuff happens. She meets 2 men, one who is ideologically opposed to her, who still thinks the landowning class should help the poorer people, but who isn't like, give up all the land that the landowning class has to make it like communal. And then she also has this guy who is more socialist, and she ends up engaged to the one who is ideologically opposed to her, but she's very influenced by the one with the more socialist ideas, and it causes all kinds of problems. There's kind of like, I would say, 3 different arcs that happen in this book. It's very long, and actually the reason that it's 3.5 stars and not 4 is just because of how long it is and how it kind of drags at some points. And I was like, all right, let's pick up the pace. But overall, I did really like it. I think Marcella's a really interesting heroine. I like that even by the end, she still has some of her socialist ideas. She has developed a lot and learned that her original thoughts aren't feasible, but she still wants to help people. She still thinks a lot of things need to change. So even though Ward was considered an anti-feminist writer, there is a lot in here about women being involved in politics. So it's super interesting. I did enjoy it. It's just too long. It's too long. All right, and then Next, I had another reread. So this is my second reread. I actually have a physical copy of this too, but it's in my Norton Anthology of British Literature, which is like, I don't even know how many thousand pages, and I'm not holding it up. It's huge. So I'm just gonna put a picture up here. This is Mrs. Warren's Profession by George Bernard Shaw. This is another play. I read this in undergrad for a Brit-Lit survey, and I really liked it then. I also really liked it now. We have Vivi Warren, who is a modern young woman, kind of a new woman. She wants to work in law and live on her own and make money and not get married. And then her mother, Mrs. Warren, is in the fallen woman category, we find out. And this is just kind of about Vivi coming to know who her mother is and how she wants to deal with that. It's very interesting. It's got a lot of interesting social commentary in there, and I quite enjoyed it. Again, I would love to see it performed because reading a play is just not the same. And last was The Improper Feminine, the women's sensation novel and the new woman writing, by Lynn Pickett. So this was really good. I gave this 4 stars, and it was exploring the two genres of the women's sensation novel and new women writing, and how these were both seen as against the, like, basically the ideology of proper femininity and why, and just kind of bringing these works back into the light because they are, and show that they actually made a really big influence on things because they've kind of been forgotten. So again, it was dealing with a lot of the same stuff the other nonfiction that I read this month was dealing with. I really enjoyed this part about the sensation novelist personally, although I actually really like the stuff with the new women novelists too. And again, I have a lot of new books to look at because of this. I need new books. But yeah, I really like this. It's going to be really useful to me. I give it 4 stars. So, those are the 15 books I read this month. Let me know down in the comments below, what did you read this month? Have you read any of these? Did you like them? Are you amazed that I got through as much of my August TBR as I did? Because I am. It has been great chatting with you all. I will see you soon. Bye.